everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of the TFDI podcast brought to you by the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative. By now, you must know that this is where we discuss trade finance market trends and the evolution of the originate to distribute model. In this episode, we receive Arnout Buschenhenke and Igor Curic, Intrapreneurs at ABN AMRO and project leads on Invoice Market, one of the ventures developed within the bank's group innovation. Invoice Market is a marketplace for the origination and distribution of invoices, and Arnout and Igor are here to tell us all about this exciting innovation. So thank you very much for being here, Arnout and Igor. So can you start by telling us a little bit about your roles at ABN AMRO and what it's like to lead innovation in such an established corporate structure?
Sure. So first, hi Melody, and I'd love to say hello to all of our listeners. I'm Igor. I'm an entrepreneur within Group Innovation, and an entrepreneur is something different than an entrepreneur. We come in from a business line and we work on ventures within Group Innovation for 18 months before returning back to our business lines. And originally I'm from Group Audit within ABN AMRO. So as I mentioned, corporate entrepreneurship is a little bit different than a normal startup. We do have support from the bank's business lines, from dedicated tech, DLT, and AI teams. We have our own expert center with strategic consultants and UX designers. And we also do have the support of ABN AMRO brand and the client network from day one. But on the other hand, we also are under the banking license, so regulation brings in a little bit more paperwork and compliance than in the regular sector.
Mm-hmm. Pros and cons, right?
Yeah, so just like Igor, I'm an entrepreneur also at Group Innovation of ABN AMRO. And my original role is the Director Innovation for ABN AMRO Asset-Based Finance, which is a full subsidiary of the bank. And I've been working with Igor for somewhat more than a year now, helping him to get Invoice Market in contact with ABF colleagues. And somewhere January this year, we deemed it a really good idea to tighten that collaboration. So I moved to Group Innovation, so we have more focus together on bringing the venture from the hypothetical to the actual transactions together.
Okay, I see. So tell us about how you got to Invoice Market. What's the market need that's addressed here by this product, and how? What are you trying to achieve, and how?
Definitely. The idea itself started 2 years ago when I took a year off from the bank to do my MBA at INSEAD. And I wrote a white paper on tokenizing accounts receivable on blockchain as an independent study project while I was studying. So when I rejoined the bank a year and a half ago, I pitched the idea to a couple of people around the bank. They put me in the direction of the Blockchain Tribe, which is a group of blockchain enthusiasts in the bank. And then when I talked to them, they referred me to Group Innovation. And a few weeks later, I was starting the venture that we now know as Invoice Market. And at Invoice Market, we create a new asset class for institutional investors to access invoices at scale. So we are a digital marketplace that facilitates the buying of debt notes, and these debt notes are backed by invoices. Debt notes are backed by invoices or investable instrument and a tradable instrument. And somewhere around a year in, are now joined the venture. So I believe it was in January, but let's hear from her now.
Yeah, so my story on creating something different for invoices actually goes a little further back. In 2014, I moved from ABN AMRO Bank to the subsidiary Asset-Based Finance, where I'm employed right now. And basically, I focused on supply chain finance, reverse factoring solutions, and making sure small and medium enterprises are getting paid quicker, because there was a very, very big problem in the European economy of SMEs not being paid quick enough and having liquidity problems. So I learned a lot about invoices, I learned about cash conversion cycles, and I felt there was this big gap in the market to bring these better payment terms to small companies. And in working that, I started looking at different parties that were moving in the supply chain world. And I came across parties like Prime Revenue and Demica. And they basically connected investors and banks to themselves fund large programs in the reverse factoring and supply chain world. And that also inspired me to look at something I call the bank without money. So I created this moonshot at asset-based finance to see if we could become a party that would require far less money to fund cash conversion cycles at companies. But we didn't really focus on the moonshot with a disruptive innovation, but more in the sense of, can we bring funding to those companies the way we do it now? And then I met Igor in the end of 2019, and he told me about the idea that we currently call Invoice Market. And I was like, this matches up completely to what I want to do in that moonshot. So I felt I needed to help him and start connecting him to people at asset-based finance. And that's where our cooperation started.
Okay, great. So just to clarify, the solution is based on the blockchain, right? Because you mentioned it was made by blockchain enthusiasts within the bank. Is that correct?
So the first iteration of the idea started off with a blockchain solution, but now we are currently focusing on old school SPV-based debt notes, and we're developing the blockchain solution as an option to scale in the future. So we're actually partnering with the Two Tokens Initiative to develop Invoice on a blockchain.
Okay, I see. So how do you see Invoice Market fitting within the broader trade finance distribution ecosystem?
So the ecosystem itself is now filled with factoring companies and banks, and what we're trying to extend it to is institutional investors, so pension funds and insurance companies, which are responsible for investing in short-term instruments to generate yield. And invoices are an increasingly popular choice to achieve this goal. So, however, institutional investors currently cannot access invoice at scale. So today, they can only access it through bilateral agreements, which are very heavy, recurring overcast costs, and a very lengthy manual process. And we at Invoice Market aim to solve these problems for them. So we want to extend the ecosystem to institutional investors.
Right now, what you do see in the market, there's many bilateral agreements coming to investors and originators, and yeah, they are a heavy process to run. So they come with heavy recurring overhead costs and lengthy processing, and yeah, we solve that.
Yeah, so that's one thing I wanted to speak to you about, actually. So a lot of commerce and in so many sectors have already moved to a marketplace model. It's a model that's becoming more and more popular. But in trade finance and the distribution of these assets, still very much based on bilateral relationships, like you mentioned. So why do you think that is?
So, essentially, many originators, factoring companies, and banks, which are in trade finance, are already distributing amongst each other. So what they really need is access to institutional investors. The bilateral relationships that they have right now work because both parties are on the equal footing. They have the same amount of knowledge, the same amount of resources to do due diligence on deals. And it ends up being factoring companies and club deals. To switch them away from this, to switch to a marketplace, we need to standardize the portfolio of distributed invoices and make them available via tradable debt notes on that same marketplace. There is a push in that direction. We just want to facilitate it faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, most of these companies are based on a business model that is originate to hold. So basically, they get invoices out of the market. They put them on the balance sheet, they fund them, so companies get liquidity, but then they hold them as part of their business model. And it's for traditional parties, it is a step towards going into an originate to distribute model, because it also changed the way they make money, and therefore also has impact analysis to do, and you know, that could be a big step for these parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I imagine it's not going to be necessarily a smooth transition, or I imagine that you anticipate challenges in this shift from these bilateral relationships to a marketplace model. So what are the sort of challenges that you envisage, both from the technical and the human standpoints, I guess, and how are you planning to overcome them?
I mean, what Arnout just said, it's really difficult to be the first one coming out of the gate and switching from a traditional originate to hold to an originate to distribute model. So the first challenge is getting both originators and investors to be the first ones in these deals. And that's why we're actually focusing on our launching transactions to have them be a proof of concept as a signal to the trade finance world that originate to distribute model is the future.
Melody, you're also asking about the human standpoint, and it will be a personal change as well for people running these deals. On the originator end, you'll see that deals can be larger for them because they can distribute the risk, but they also need to keep track of that the risk appetite that they were having as an originator before remains the same, because this is also what's going to set the quality for what they can distribute. And on the investor end, parties also need to start looking at standard elements of their risk appetite that will fit portfolios of invoicing, so they cannot constantly negotiate with others. So that's going to make a difference. That standardization, going more online, more thinking in terms of data than just negotiating and working with each other, will be a change.
And I'm curious to know, I'm not sure how much you've talked about Invoice Market to the market yet, but to the extent that you have, what has been the reaction so far, and what's the interest both on the originator side and on the investor side?
So we've already been publicly telling everybody what we're doing. We want both originators and investors to reach out to us, so it's not just us pulling, but them pushing as well. And the feedback so far has been overwhelmingly positive. Originators are facing regulatory issues. Basel IV is upcoming. Some have limit breaches that they need to handle. And they are looking for a new way to distribute outside of flood deals. And I can even say that the bottleneck is on the originator side, because the demand from institutional investors has been overwhelming. Right now, they're facing negative interest rates, very low risk reward payouts, and invoices as an asset class are not readily available. So just getting rid of all of those roadblocks and having institutional investors be able to invest in invoices at scale would be a win-win for both parties.
Yeah, that sounds great. So we'll be looking forward to hearing the news about Invoice Market and the development of the product. I don't know if you've heard the podcast before, but I like to end the conversation on a more personal note, where I ask my guests to share something they've read or heard recently that sparked their curiosity or inspired them. It doesn't have to be business related or trade finance related, but it can if you prefer. So I don't know who. Let's start with Arnout. What's your latest inspiration?
Well, so a couple of weeks ago, I watched Seaspiracy on Netflix.
Yeah, I saw it.
And that scared me really a lot. And considering that was good journalism, following facts. I'm also into facts. And Anna, our colleague, told me to read the book Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Since I like that so much, I also got more positively inspired, because basically the book tells about trends and how to look at those trends in a global scale, on a time scale, and that our society is actually progressing really well. So if we can, as a society, work better together and see what things we do to the planet, we should be on a good road to actually doing some positive things here. And even though that is also a little bit on a financial note, because this is also what inspires me to drive our business model, because I believe that we can accelerate this positive growth with what we do.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that the book Factfulness liberated you from the depression of watching Seaspiracy?
Yeah, somewhat, yes, but not entirely, because Seaspiracy is also good journalism. So there's a lot of facts being tracked in there, watching the facts for what they are also inspires to do the things that need to be done. So I
Absolutely.
basically stopped eating fish.
Yeah, great. Me too. It's an efficient documentary.
Yeah, it is.
What about you, Igor?
So I've also got a book to mention, but nothing so sustainability focused. It's a great book that just came out by Troy Hinkoff called Levers, and it gives great insights into how to set up a successful startup, how to focus on what's important in the business, how to do your P&Ls and everything that a startup founder could ever want and usually needs, and you only realize that when you're stuck in a rut and you need some help and you think, why has nobody ever written a book about it? So many people have gone down this startup journey, and now finally one of those books has been written. So a huge recommendation to anybody that wants to check it out. And just putting it down, looking for my next one. So probably Factfulness is next on the team's list.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you for all your insights and for this lively conversation. And I also take this time to thank our listeners and encourage you to leave any comments that you may have in the comments section. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melody, and thank you for all our listeners. If anybody wants to reach out to us, please do. Would love to have a call and discuss future steps.
Thanks so much.